Okay, so it's Cat Stanley Space Demon coming at you again. And a lot has been written and said over the years about Yoko Ono and her role in the breakup of the Beatles. But I believe her role, if any, has been significantly overblown. In fact, the various band members themselves, including Paul, George, and Ringo, have debunked that notion throughout the years that Yoko Ono broke up the Beatles. And, I believe her presence was more of a symptom rather than a cause of the issues that the band were having at that particular time. I mean, if you look at the individual band members, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, when Yoko hit the scene, their songwriting partnership existed pretty much in name only. They were writing largely on their own. And, Lennon was thinking more about larger, quote unquote, more important issues, political issues, and incorporating that into his lyrics. Whereas Paul was still focused on songwriting craft and still falling back more on his lightweight, pop-oriented lyrics that he was most known for. And, George Harrison was becoming increasingly frustrated with his lack of representation on record, and he was sitting on a substantial backlog of original material which would manifest itself on his first post-Beatles debut, the epic 3-disc collection, his All Things Must Pass solo effort post-Beatles. So change was in the wind in Beatles country long before Yoko Ono's presence. Now, having her around all the time obviously probably didn't help, and it may have even hastened the inevitable breakup of the band. But to say it was purely Yoko Ono who broke up the Beatles, I think would be oversimplifying things at the very least. But one guy who certainly was no Yoko Ono fan, and perhaps he still believes that she was the cause of the breakup of the band, was none other than Gene Simmons, bassist, vocalist, and founding member of Hall of Fame Thunder Rockers, Kiss. And he was recently made an appearance on Rick Rubin's podcast. Rick Rubin, the famous producer, Beastie Boys, Run DMC, Johnny Cash, Metallica, Tom Petty, all those guys that he produced, had Gene Simmons on his podcast. And it's kind of funny because Gene Simmons was talking about Led Zeppelin and how they were an influence on him. And then Gene starts talking about Rick Rubin's musical pedigree, and almost kind of as a non sequitur, out of the blue, he just goes into this rant slamming Yoko Ono, and it's pretty funny. I'm going to play the clip here so you can listen to it. Gene Simmons slams Yoko Ono.
It's so funny. After all this time, I can sit here and remember that first time I heard Zeppelin, and then many years later, Jimmy Page becomes a friend. Like, how does that work?
Amazing.
I mean, your journey coming from Run DMC and then Beastie Boys and you, I read up on you, Rubin, insisting you put guitars in with the rap and do that, and combining Run DMC with Aerosmith. I mean, great stuff that, left to its own devices, would have probably gone down familiar roads. It's the pushing against the walls that makes it like, whoa, what? What is that?
Yeah.
And Yoko still doesn't belong on any stage anywhere. Not with Chuck Berry and John Lennon on the same stage. You saw that footage, right?
I don't think so.
John Lennon and Yoko were co-hosting the Mike Douglas show, an afternoon variety show.
Mm-hmm.
That was our first TV show as well. And it was a big
Mike
deal.
Douglas?
Yes.
Amazing.
4:00 in the afternoon, nationwide, when Mom was home.
Yeah.
And they had comedians and that kind of stuff, and they did rock and roll. And for 1 week, John Lennon and Yoko were co-hosting. And Lennon, because he was such an aficionado of the Founding Fathers, brought Chuck Berry on. And he wanted to play with Chuck Berry. Like, who didn't? And they did, with not rehearsing. And Yoko is right near John, bless her. I don't know how to describe it. Just oral madness. It had nothing to do with melody, rhythm, almost like Dr. Yanov's scream therapy. You know, you put somebody in, get your anger out, and just go, like that.
You know, primal scream therapy is actually a thing, and John Lennon was at the time studying primal scream therapy, and he even, I believe, incorporated some primal scream techniques into his singing on the Plastic Ono Band album, his first post-Beatles solo effort. So yeah, primal scream therapy is actually a thing.
And you can see it on YouTube. There's a close-up of Chuck Berry's eyes just wide open like a deer in the headlights. What the hell is that? And he's looking at Lennon. Lennon's just going along with it. I don't know why. At any rate, it was a magical time.
So yeah, that Yoko Ono, John Lennon, Chuck Berry appearance on the Mike Douglas Show is the stuff of legends. As legend has it, whoever was running sound on the Mike Douglas Show that day turned off Yoko Ono's microphone because of the primal screaming and her, signature vocals. It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny to people talk about John Lennon, Yoko Ono. Why'd he put up with that kind of stuff? I was recently reading Geraldo Rivera. You might remember him, the news reporter, famous guy for Al Capone's vaults. When he was making his way up the media ladder, he was a big sensation back in the 1970s in New York City. He was starting to blow up in television as a reporter for WABC in New York City in the 70s. I guess Geraldo actually got to know John Lennon. They got to become fairly close enough that Geraldo actually visited Lennon on a social call at his New York City apartment. And as Geraldo tells the story, that John and Yoko at the time were very open, very free. They had no qualms about, changing clothes in front of guests, walking around nude. And I guess this happened at one point. Geraldo visited the apartment, and I guess Yoko was walking around nude, and Geraldo was taken aback by the ampleness of her bosom, Yoko's very large breasts. He was very impressed, and I guess Geraldo's theory was that the reason why Lennon was so mesmerized by Yoko Ono was purely, it was a sexual thing. He was, that vitamin P factor really warped his mind. That was Geraldo's theory after he had seen Yoko Ono nude. I don't know if that's entirely an explanation for it. I'm sure that's part of it. People might have different opinions as far as Yoko Ono's looks. Obviously, maybe she's not everybody's cup of tea, but Lennon was into it. But, I think if Lennon, even at that time, if he was just looking for sex, I don't think he would have had any trouble finding it. So to say that his relationship with Yoko Ono was purely based on sex, I don't think is entirely true. Probably a big part of it, though. So that's Geraldo Rivera's theory. After he caught a glimpse of Yoko Ono nude, he understood why Lennon was so into it. But that's the video. Hope you guys dug it. Gene Simmons slams Yoko Ono. Not a fan. Of course, Gene Simmons, big Beatle guy. And if you haven't watched my earlier video about Gene Simmons' love of music, where I talk about more in depth or a little bit more about him going on that Rick Rubin podcast, check it out. Or just go ahead and check out the full Rick Rubin interview with Gene Simmons. Excellent interview for somebody like me who doesn't normally watch Gene Simmons interviews anymore, because I don't really think he has more to offer that I haven't already heard. This one in particular, I really like. Highly recommend it. So hope you dug this one, and we'll see you next time.
Stanley the One-Eared Monster. Stanley the One-Eared Monster.
Who's here?